was no Bitcoin, there would be no NFTs, no metaverse, no Ethereum, no anything, right? This was the first one. And I believe it's the most high integrity because the founders did not care about fame, money, or power. They created.
Thank you so much for tuning into Journey with Christian Evans podcast. I'm your host, as always, Christian Evans. And guys, we have a very special guest on tonight, and I'm so excited about having this woman on. She is the CEO and board member, investor, and founder of LDP Ventures and Women's Entrepreneurship Day organization, WEDO. She's also the chief pet officer of Animal Fair Media, which we're going to be diving into. It's a really cool vertical. She is also known for her work in promoting women entrepreneurs, animal rescue, impact investment, and women in technology. She has a passion for disruptive technologies and their positive social impact. She's also authored several books, appeared in various media, well-established outlets, and has been a keynote speaker at events such as United Nations, Harvard University, and Davos. Please welcome my next guest, the one and only Wendy Diamond. How you doing today, Wendy?
Fantastic. Woohoo!
Wonderful. I am looking forward to this conversation, and I just thought your background in so many different things, not only did you succeed but also made a huge impact in these different verticals that you got into. But I want to kind of get into a little bit of fun stuff before we dive into all the investing and all that fun things. You started out as this love for pets, and you obviously were able to work with, pet and high-level celebrities. Help us understand the evolution of that and where that idea came from.
Okay, sure. Well, when I first moved to New York, I was really young, right? And, I graduated from college. I sent out hundreds of resumes. No one gave me a job. And so, when I moved to New York, I had to figure out my own life, right? And I ended up volunteering for the Coalition for the Homeless on their van. And I would feed 1,000 people per week, right? And it just was so impactful to me. And I loved doing it that I wanted to make a difference, right? So I decided at that point when I was 24, I think, that I would do 2 cookbooks. And I did 2 cookbooks with all the celebrities like Madonna and everybody. And we raised $500,000 for the homeless. I was on Oprah and Howard Stern and all this stuff. And it supported the Coalition for the Homeless here in New York, but Empty the Shelters at that time was an organization across the country helping homeless people. And when I was recently in New York, I felt a little alone. I decided I was going to adopt a dog. So I went to our city shelter, and when I got there, I couldn't believe it. Like there were all these purebreds, purebred cats, purebred dogs, and I adopted a purebred Maltese and a purebred Russian blue cat. And I like cats too. And so what happened, when I couldn't believe when I came home, I was just like, how did I get these animals, these purebreds? And I started doing research, and I learned 12 million animals were euthanized a year that year. And at the time, and I know it's hard to believe today, but at that time, nobody was talking about adoption or rescue. There was nothing in the media about celebrities and pets. And I was like, wow, if we could bring celebrities and pop culture to the animal rescue world and teach everyone you could adopt any breed, any size, any age, I knew we could bring that number of 12 million animal euthanized a year down, right? So I created a media company, not knowing any better, right? Because I'm an entrepreneur, I just go in, I don't even think about like anything. And so, because I don't have that schooling, right, of like Harvard Business School of, you should plan and do. And I just kind of did it because I really wanted to make, help these animals because I couldn't believe that number. And so that's when I created the first media company to bring celebrities and pop culture to the animal rescue world, because everyone in the world wants to help. You just have to make it easy for them. So just to show like these celebrities that adopted animals and that you could adopt any breed, any size, any age, I knew we could bring that number down. So we, Vanity Fair and New York Times and Fox and everybody basically said we brought celebrities and pop culture to the animal rescue world. So our launch was like, we created the first ever pet fashion show in history. And that's where we had like Hilary Swank and all these famous people walking rescue dogs, wearing famous designer dog outfits. And so it just created that whole media world of bringing celebrities and pets to pop culture.
Well, you brought you obviously, just like an entrepreneur, you go out there, you find a problem, and you solve the problem with your media and obviously your vertical. And I thought that was so interesting how you approach that, but also you were able to leverage your Rolodex, your connections, to be able to bring awareness to this. And where did the creativity, was that more of your entrepreneurial side where you were able to bring a lot of creativity and, like you just mentioned, a dog show and all those fun things in a beauty show and so forth? I thought that was kind of a cool approach, bringing awareness to it, raising donations and so forth to it, but also in a creative aspect.
I think I've always been scrappy, right? Like I've always had like figure out a way to do it, right? I never had big budgets and things like that. And so being, someone who just really loves making a difference in the world, like I've never worked on anything that didn't matter, right? It just is really in me to do that. I knew just to create funny ways to do things. Like I created a term now that's used everywhere called yappy hour, you know, happy hour, but yappy hour for dogs, right? And I created that word and I went across the country and I would do these parties where we would raise money for the local animal rescue groups because rescue is local, by the way. People don't realize when you're giving money to the ASPCA or Humane Society of the United States has nothing to do with your SPCA in your local community, right? Or Humane Society in your local community. And it's really key for people to understand that because those local groups are the ones that are really rescuing these animals and really the ones that are supporting those animals in your community. And so I just would go on, I would write a book, so I have 10 books out, how to understand men through their dogs, how to understand women through their cats. It's a dog's world. It's a cat's world, how to train your boss to roll over. And I would then take these books and I'd go on a book tour, but always tie it in to help support the local animal rescue groups and create fun, different events to do that.
That's incredible. And I just think that the creativity aspect. Now, during this journey in brand awareness and partnership and collaboration with these A celebrities and very well known individuals, what were some of those tough parts? Were there certain, or was it more of just kind of you had the macro kind of tailwind and a lot of just, excitement around it, around this project that it was like you just hit with such massive momentum that there was not a lot of hurdles that you had to overcome. But I would imagine in anything there was probably some hurdles. What were those things, and how did you overcome
I
those?
mean, Christian, I mean, I don't know. I mean, there's very few people I know that can say this was easy. Anything was easy, right? I mean, first of all, when we launched Animal Fair, and it was like Vanity Fair, Animal Fair, but fairness to animals to bring awareness towards animal rescue, animal welfare, and pet lifestyle issues. And so when we launched, we went to all those advertisers. Literally, Purina said to me, "We can't advertise with you because you're putting dogs in clothing." Okay, like that was like they said that to me. Now they are sponsoring one of the big Purina's sponsoring one of the biggest pet fashion shows, in the country, right? So, it just I think there's so many obstacles, right? There's so many but I think when you really have a passion for something and a purpose, it just drove me. So for the first 4 years, it was almost impossible, right? I mean, we did get Renee Zellweger and her dog on our first cover. And, but it just still was always really hard because I was never willing to work with the big groups that had all the money. I was always trying to help the local animal rescue groups. So it's just a kind of, and they don't have any marketing or PR. So I was always trying to be creative and working really hard to bring awareness and to, help everyone realize, that you should adopt versus buy. We could bring that number down.
I was curious, just on a personal note. Obviously, there's been a lot of controversy in regards. When I was doing research for this podcast, in regards to those puppy mills and those kind of some companies. I'm not going to say any, but obviously some that are kind of known for having some sort of obviously it's a merchandise, and that's kind of what they think about. It's a product, and they're trying to sell, like you mentioned, adopt versus buy. What was How did you guys navigate that in regards to making sure that obviously you guys are, it looks like you want to have us. Okay, go ahead, go, perfect.
Listen. I mean, I've got so many nemesis like that want me dead. Dennis Sprung, the head of the AKC. You know what? He can do whatever he wants, but he hates me because the last thing the AKC ever wanted in their lives was to have to support mutts and adoption, right? Because they get $25 for each dog. Well, at that time, I don't know what it is now, but they would get $25 for anybody that bought a dog and it was a purebred. They would register it with the AKC. So the AKC is a very wealthy group of people, organization. And so if somebody adopts, that means the AKC and all those people that are making a lot of money at the AKC, right? That means, oh no, that's not good for us, right? So we had I was dealing with a lot of stuff at that time. Finally the AKC has come around a little bit, but remember that's not their business, right? Their business is to sell and animals and who do you think is paying for the lobbyists in Washington to allow puppy mills to, have hundreds and hundreds of animals? Really, if people really want to bring, right now it's about 2 million animals euthanized a year. You want to bring that down, legally, people should only be allowed to breed, a number of dogs that they can handle themselves, 10, let's say. But if you're doing hundreds, of course, there's going to be conditions, and some that are not, handled properly and so forth.
Yeah, with like any in any industry, there's always an underbelly. Like there's always that kind of shady stuff that happens, and that's why I was curious. Obviously, when you are a naysayer and you kind of stick your head out and say, "Hey, this is something going on, and we want to obviously bring awareness to this and attention," then you start climbing the mountain. People can start throwing tomatoes and stuff at you, right? Which is obviously criticism and all that crap. And so now in today's social media world, how has that affected you in regards to obviously making sure that you're still on that path, that North Star, right? And being able to mitigate all that other naysaying and know that, hey, you know what? You know who you are, you know what you're doing, and even with all the negativity, you're still going to go out there and achieve that North Star, you and your company.
Well, I think it goes, my background is, I created the media company. I ended up being one of the first people to bring, dogs up for adoption on TV and then getting TV shows and all this stuff. And one of the things, 10 books out, 5 TV shows, 3 Guinness World Records, a primetime show on CBS called Greatest American Dog, on the Today Show every month. I got a crazy stalker bully, right? And so that was in 2011, 12. And that's what basically made me realize, like, whoa, because I never got in this to be famous or, I'm not into fame, money, or power, right? I, started a media company to help animal rescue, right? Basically. And it wasn't about like, oh, and so I had so many opportunities to sign on the dotted line to things that could have made me quite wealthy, but I didn't do it because I have integrity in everything I do. And when you have integrity and you know what you're doing and you're confident and you're doing it for the right reasons, when you have those naysayers and those people, it's, for me, I don't really care anymore. Like, no one can hurt me anymore. I don't need to be famous. I feel like the animal rescue world became a little disingenuous, and I just love helping. So whether it's doing this or helping impoverished women become entrepreneurs or doing whatever I do, I just love doing it.
Well, and you speak of female founders going out there, and you with LDP Ventures, you obviously deploy a lot of capital, and you guys say investing in the underdog, a philosophy inspired by the founder's rescue dog Lucky Diamond. Famous pop-ups is the inspiration behind the venture's purpose-driven strategy and symbolizes your commitment to a more just and equitable future for all living beings. Now, you guys also deploy a lot of capital in blockchain, robotics, fintech, real estate, artificial intelligence, VR, all that fun stuff. Now, my question is, you've been able to network with an incredible amount of individuals, and we've talked on this podcast about how VC capital, there's only about 2 to maybe 5% are deployed toward female founders. And obviously we've
Yeah,
had
less
that
than two.
conversation.
Less than two. I don't know where it's by. Yeah, no, exactly. Well, so what happened? I had a stalker, right? So, at that point, I stopped being public about what I was doing and all this stuff. I keep, promoting animal rescue and getting a dog adopted a day on our social media, but I don't, I wasn't going out there, and I ended up taking a vacation to Honduras, not realizing it was the murder capital of the world. And that's where I, volunteered for an organization that gives microloans to impoverished women. And I was supposed to go for a couple hours. I spent 3 days and learned all about those statistics in 2013, when, again, nobody was talking about women entrepreneurs or women in business in that time, like literally. And even like the State Department's initiative towards entrepreneurs never even recognized women at the time, right? UN Women wasn't even talking about entrepreneurship. It was very few people. None of the companies had women's movements, really. A few of them did, like Dell and a couple, but very few did, right? And that's when I realized, wow, if we could do what we did in the animal world, and, if we can basically bring awareness to the importance of empowering women in business, we can alleviate poverty. At that time in 2013, 250 million girls were living in poverty. 1%, it's doubled. 1% of venture dollars at the time went to female founders. So that's when I was like, wow, I'm going to go back to New York and I'm going to create an official day in the world. Because if we create an official day, we create the conversation. So I went, at the time it was like Governor Cuomo and Mayor de Blasio, and I went to them and I said, hey, could we make November 19th Women's Entrepreneurship Day? And so that was how it all began. And that was the idea behind creating Women's Entrepreneurship Day. And that's how, we're now in 100 countries, recognized by US Congress, Governor Hochul now, and President of Mexico, and all these different people. And I think TED, how TED, people talk about themselves and ideas, TED Talks, right? We bring governments, business leaders, civil society, entrepreneurs, investors together to collaborate to find solutions to economically empower women from the ground up approach.
And because of this initiative, I'd love for you to just share a few stories maybe of women. You don't have to share their names or anything, but of a few stories that because of this initiative, you have seen the capitalization as well as the awareness bring to this this vertical that obviously needs to be brought to the forefront, definitely in today's world.
Well, I mean, a few things that when de Blasio wasn't the best mayor for New York City, right? Judas. But at the end, he launched, he officially proclaimed Women's Entrepreneurship Day. And for proclaiming that, he also launched at the same time, in honor of that, We NYC, where now for the last, 10 years, they've been funding a program to support women entrepreneurs in New York City, right? I think it's $20 million budget. Same thing with Garcetti in LA. We also created the first Women in Disability startup cohort to help disabled women become entrepreneurs. And now Google for Startups is funding the whole thing, and that's now, going on. So we just work, and, we're big partners with Opportunity International, where we fund thousands of impoverished women with microloans. They're micro loans, so they're paying them back and it goes to another woman, right? And we also, are partners with Defy Ventures, helping incarcerated women with an entrepreneurship program while they're in about 1 year or 2 years from leaving prison, which has been super successful, 84% success rate, meaning they don't go back to prison when they get out. Because you know how hard it is for these people. I mean, they know when, do you have a criminal record? They have to say yes, right? So it's really complicated. So I believe giving a hand up, not a handout, is the key to success, right? When women are empowered in business, they have self-confidence and dignity. They don't allow human rights violations, right? And with all this and all the data that backs all this, it's just so important to support women, and especially, with entrepreneurship. Because if you work for a company, you better, be in there trying to give ideas, because it's not easy to keep your job anymore, as we've seen all these jobs now being eliminated.
100%, 100%. And it was interesting looping back on the VC, the number, like you mentioned, less than 2% of VC deploy is toward founders. And so it's cool to see, like you mentioned, because of this niche that you established, we're seeing a lot more kind of deploy and more awareness, which then obviously helps us then obviously deploy more capital toward it. And it's also interesting that someone mentioned this to me, where female founders actually outperform male founders by a very large margin, actually. And I thought that was really cool when he showed that to me. I thought, oh, that's actually very impressive. Now,
Yeah,
I want to
I
ask.
have experience myself.
Oh, wonderful! Let's dive into that.
Well, yeah, like so. For instance, let's see. I have to. When I first got into investing, when you first get in it and you're not like a professional, I didn't have the experience, right? And I was starting to invest and so forth. I got involved with some wrong people, right? And I invested and I obviously lost. But the percentage of the women founders in our portfolio have been super successful. I mean, one would be Base Paws. Have you ever heard of that company?
I have not, no.
23andMe for pets, to help pets live longer and healthier lives using their DNA, the genome, blah, 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 and then selling that data to the pet health companies so that they can create more healthcare that is going to help pets live longer and healthier lives, selling it to the pet food companies. She was on Shark Tank. Kevin O'Leary invested in her. And when she was going for her Series A, I mean, when first of all, when you met the founder, Anna Skya, when you met her, you were like, "Holy cow, this she's going to make it happen, right?" And you kind of know those people that just have that drive. And so she was going for her Series A, and then Zoetis came, and I think they bought her 30x. So it's all about the people, but I feel like especially looking at our portfolio, definitely feel the women have far outdid the men. Hate to
Well,
say it.
what's
Say
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I think you guys do outperform us, and that's statistically shown, and it's very interesting to see that. Now, I want to ask this, just on a side note. I am actually astounded by how much the dog market has exploded. It has become like a multi billion dollar company, industry, and it's really
right.
actually just on a side note. It's just been really caught me off guard. I've seen some amazing, I mean, you look at all sorts of different companies that are have healthcare or clothing or bones and all sorts of other different things. Chewy is a really great subscription model and so forth. So, but has that caught you off guard, or did you kind of, because you were already in that industry, and then you started looking at these other verticals within this? Did you kind of already you were already planted in that, and you started seeing, okay, this is going to be huge because how many people spend a lot of money for their dogs and so forth?
I knew it was going to be huge just from my experience of having animals when I was a child. I mean, how can anyone deny the love you get from, especially a dog, the unconditional love, the loyalty, the bond? They never talk back. They're just sweet. They're just there for you at every moment. And so, come here, Happy. We're talking about it. Come here, come here. Watch this. Watch this. This is so funny. Come here, Happy. Come here. Come on.
Oh,
Is that the funniest thing? Anyway, so just dogs are the best thing you could ever. I mean, I knew it, and I knew it, and but by the way, it's been going up slowly, right? It hasn't just gone boom, right? It's slowly happened, and if you look at where it started happening, you could kind of like put the pinpoint on when we created Animal Fair, because at that time there were only a few people doing dog bags. There were maybe, I mean, Fifi and Romeo, I think, was the only real dog fashion brand. And so, as you look at this, where this has gone is when celebrities and pop culture take over. That's what happened, because then you started seeing more dogs on TV shows. You saw People Magazine now doing celebrities and pets, and you saw all this stuff. That's what brought, and people now realize how important pets are in our lives.
yeah, I remember numerous times. I had two dogs, and I remember numerous times my
You
girlfriend and I,
have
we
an
would go
another
to. We do not. She has them, but the thing is she. I remember every time we would go to, Pets, Petco or whatever, we would always walk out with a whole bunch of handful of stuff, of cute little sweaters and things like that. They were the cutest little things, but that's awesome. And now let me dive into the LDP Ventures. You focus on impact investing, and what I find so interesting right now at the macro side, impact investing has got a lot of tailwind right now. But I want to help us understand how you think about impact investing, and then the ESG side of things as well, because it is social impact, and that's kind of what you're optimizing for. But sometimes I do believe that sometimes, because I've had a conversation with a friend of mine where sometimes if you're impact investing doesn't mean that you're going for the best internal rate of return, right? So it might be total two different things or pendulums, but I truly believe that sometimes it could align holistically, and by having impact investing you can actually have a really phenomenal IRR. But I wanted to ask you, Wendy, how do you approach impact investing, and what is your perspective on that? How do you think about that?
Well, first of all, I've been in impact my whole entire life, right? So everything I've done has been with that mindset. so I now that people, it's an official word and it's official. People talk about it all the time with ESG and et cetera. This is just part of my mindset. So looking at what we invest in and so forth, it's more about number one, do we understand it? Right? Do I understand what we are investing in? So whether, so we're across a lot of different funds and startups and et cetera. The funds are everything from cell-based, plant-based, cell agriculture, plant-based fund, right? Why are we in that? I've been a vegetarian since I was 7 years old. I would do anything for better food for us, right? So that's, that would be one reason, right? Another reason is health AI. I mean, look at, we're in a fund called Tau Ventures, which is, health AI. Why are we in that? I mean, that is the future. AI is, as we see today, right, is the future of everything. We're also in Web3. I've been in Bitcoin since 2014. I really believe in the impact of Bitcoin. See, when we go into Web3 and Bitcoin and crypto and all that, my mindset's different than most people. I never went in it because I was going to make money. I went in 2014 after meeting a goat farmer in Botswana through my foundation in Africa, who this woman created the Satoshi Center in her one-room hut with a dirt floor because she learned about Bitcoin in 2011 when she was trying to find money to pay for her son's healthcare and couldn't find it, but she learned about Bitcoin. So she decided to dedicate her life and take her one-room hut and teach people about Bitcoin. And that's where I met her in 2014 and did my own research and realized, wow, Bitcoin, let's go from today, is the mother of this whole ecosystem, Web3, right? If there was no Bitcoin, there would be no NFTs, no metaverse, no Ethereum, no anything, right? This was the first one. And I believe it's the most high integrity because the founders did not care about fame, money, or power. They created a fake name, so they have no fame. They created a fake name, so they have no power. They've never sold or transferred a Bitcoin. Why? Because it's traceable and transparent and immutable. So the numbers. So and you can follow the numbers. And those have been dormant for the whole time, going on our 13th year. And so, and the reason why they ended up launching Bitcoin was after the 2008 housing and financial crisis. Who lost? People. The banks got bailed out, right? The companies got bailed out, but the people lost. And so they came together, some of the smartest minds in the world, created a fake name and launched Bitcoin into the world on blockchain to enable peer-to-peer transactions without the need of middle people, right? Banks, lawyers, and to really, when you think about it, support the 2.5 billion unbanked to be part of the financial ecosystem. Because now people don't need banks. They can just go right on their phone.
Yeah, it's an incredible story, and the evolution of that area is still untapped and massive potential behind it. When you're looking at, and like you just mentioned, you are in a lot of different verticals. When you're underwriting these founders, I know a lot of times investors, they really focus on the founding team, the CEO, who are they, really understanding them and so forth. And then of course they look at, their business concept and proof of
Right.
concept and stuff like that, right? Let's dive into the team first. How do you approach that conversation, that dialogue to, yeah, I hate to say underwrite, but underwrite that team to really feel like, okay, you got a good connection. There's that synergy, and I like this team, and I think that they could really fulfill on this product. What do you do? What are you looking for when you're having those conversations with those female founders?
Number one, do I like what they're doing? And do I believe in what they're doing? And do I believe in them? And do I believe in why they're doing it? And do I believe that these people will be able to do it? Number one. Number two, I want to know, what they're doing after dinner. I want to know everything because it's really about the people, right? And you really need to find, especially in this day and age, high integrity people. And so we don't, I will never, and I know we'll never be able to, but I will never invest in somebody I have not met and that I do not really know who they are because I think that is super, super important. Also, we have an amazing group of people that advise us in every vertical. So some of the smartest people in every vertical who give us advice and tell us about, what their opinions are before we go in. Very rarely do we go into very, very early, like pre-seed. But we did go into a pre-seed recently in the Web3 space called Extremely, which was a girl, she's like in her 20s, and she worked at BMW as a software engineer and is creating a infrastructure play, right? Because we need the infrastructure for this to become mainstream, right? I'm not, I am no techie. Somehow I've been in this for a long time and survived, but it is so complicated, right? So we need to make this where it's just easy, like you just turn on your phone, right? Or you turn on the TV. We don't need to know what's going on in the background, right? But investing in the infrastructure of this world, which I believe is the most important to take away, when the difference between Web 2 and Web 3, right? Is Web 2, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, they own all your data. They're profiting from your data. Web 3 is you own your own data and you benefit and profit from your own data. And I think that's super, super important. And I think that is going to be the biggest game changer and, disruption in history when this
There's some
comes.
exciting stuff. Oh, 100%. And I mean, you just see the evolution and the massive movement and momentum behind these industries. It's just very exciting. And we're going to see this actually play out in our lives, which is really fun. When you're talking about with these underwriting these teams and these founders, like you mentioned, integrity is the number one thing that you look for as well, of course, and obviously getting to know them outside and inside that work office space. But what are some red flags? You obviously, you mentioned integrity, right? And I definitely understand that. Is there something where it's like an immediate no, where it's like, okay, hey, I saw you on, because now in today's world, everybody's got a social presence, so you can see that, okay, hey, you said this, or there was something going on here, or the way you approach this, or this investor, I'm not getting good vibes from, et cetera, et cetera. Like, what were some red flags that you automatically say, hey, no, I'm out, totally, 100%, and it may be a really good business concept. It may, scale to the moon, but there's something that you just didn't feel right that you had to pass on because that was a red flag for you.
It's we all know, right? It's your feeling, and how do you feel around them? Are you excited? Do you want to talk to them? Do you want to support them? Do you want to introduce them to your whole network? Right? And I think that's the key because, I in this day and age, it's hard to find people who can focus. And, as an entrepreneur, you have to focus, you have to pivot, you have to do so. And not everyone can do that. And especially if you're looking to scale to create a large business, right? And so I think for us and for me personally, it's just that gut feeling. It's that gut feeling is, do I trust them? Do I like them? Right. And I've been around enough and have met enough people and been screwed over enough to know now a lot. So I feel very fortunate to currently be with and invest in some of the greatest people and companies.
That's awesome. And now you mentioned, and this is something I don't talk much about, but the people that you surround yourself when you're underwriting the deal as well. Because obviously, like you mentioned, you've gone through enough life experience where you've been able to dial in that intuition and you just got that feeling. But then on the logical basis, so like the metrics, et cetera, you also have to underwrite that as well. And then you kind of rely on some of your, it sounds like your really high level friends, right? Individuals that are really, excelled in have an incredible experience or expertise in that industry or in that vertical to help you underwrite and make sure that you're seeing everything. How did you find those individuals to help you be able to underwrite that properly? Was that just through network? Was that just through conversations, or was that through partnerships or collaborations, or what did that look like to be able to build those synergistic relationships so that it was kind of a yin and yang approach?
First of all, my whole life has been dedicated to helping people. Right. I've been someone who has been, have thousands of people have, adopted dogs through me or what, I mean, just so many things. And I love helping the world. So I think if the more you give in life, the more you get. And I feel like because I've just done so much to help the world, and I've done so much to try to help the world, and to be able to give advice to people and to help people, I feel you surround yourself with people that are just like and that are going to inspire you, that are smarter than you, and that are experts in their field, right? First of all companies need to be open, number one, because you always need somebody out of the box that's also within that company too. And you have to know that, right? Because with this world, it's a global economy, it's a global world. To be able to take and partner and do all these different things can really accelerate your growth, right? And that's one of the things I love to do when I get involved. I'm in one company called Lightline Medical. This is a 70-year-old woman. 70-year-old woman. I walked in halfway in her presentation. She was a 70-year-old woman, had more energy than me. And I have a lot of energy. And I was like, who is this? And when I started listening, I was like, oh my gosh. She was a patent attorney at Morrison Forster, MoFo, for 20 years. She married her client who took 3 health companies public, including Myriad Genetics. She is one of the founders of this company that created the visible light to prevent any infection in catheters and dialysis. The 3rd largest death rate in the entire world, infections. This stops it. It's proven it works, blah, 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 blah. So I, of course, my father passed away from kidney failure infection, so I knew this. Otherwise, I would know nothing about this, right? Because, but I knew about it and I understood it. So this would enable people to have dialysis at home without that scare of getting infections. If you ask 1 out of 2 people and say, you want to go to the hospital? They're scared to death because they're scared to get an infection, right? And so when I met her, I was like, oh my gosh, she just, I know every night at 8:00, she is having drinks with her husband at home. I know this. Like, I know everything about this woman's life. And so for me, it's a pleasure to introduce her to my ecosystem. And, I brought in Mayo Clinic. Mayo Clinic now invested, and their chief nephrologist is advising the company. And we're on our way now to saving millions of lives. And also the hospitals will save billions of dollars. So for me, it's all about the people. Do I love what they're doing? Do the people that I have in my ecosystem, do they believe in the technology? And do they understand it? Because I'm certainly never going to understand the technology, right? And do I feel comfortable enough to open up my network of my whole life helping the world, right? And being all over the world, to be able to help them. And that's, I think, the key. So, a lot of people come to me, hey, will you advise me? And I say no to probably at least 1 a week of advisor stuff, because I'm like, I don't want to advise somebody and get shares of their company if I don't like them, or I don't like their company, or I don't believe in what they're doing, or I don't feel, comfortable, right?
It's so powerful because you are so mission focused and vision focused as well, that if they don't align, and you're very quick to say no. And I appreciate unpacking that, but it's also so cool where you've been able to establish, like, you are the fuel to the fire, right? Where it's like, hey, I've got you, Wendy, you have an incredible Rolodex, and you could basically open up 3 or 4 doors for your founders, and boom, all of a sudden they have, enterprise clients. But not only that, but it's about relationships. And I want to ask a little bit about this because I think in today's world, it is so focused on sales and, turning the dial and closing people and making money and all that fun stuff. And we've lost that aspect of just relationships. And the only way you've been able to establish the amount of Rolodex and the amount of people and the amount of influence and the amount of impact that you have is because you're just very relational. You're very people oriented. And I just admire that of you. But I want to ask you, obviously, was that an evolution for yourself, or was that, how do you intentionally become and stay relational and relationship focused with your team, with everybody that you work with all the individuals that you impact?
So it's funny, right? I think I connect with, I think because I'm very genuine. Like, I'm not in it. Like, I don't, I do things because I genuinely care. Right. And I genuinely would not get involved with something unless it meant, I felt very comfortable. So first off, I'm really bad at keeping contact, right? Because I had a stalker for 4 years, right? They created 50 anonymous email addresses to defame and slander me and would stalk me online and stalk me in person. It was just so crazy. So I got really scared of people, and it really kind of set me back. Before I was doing events every day and I was like out there and blah, 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 posting everything about my life and all that kind of stuff. Not about my personal life, but I would always do it about, what I was doing to help, with animals and all that kind of stuff. And now it's interesting, right? Because I'm in a different stage of life, right? I always say to people, if I didn't have my stalker, I wouldn't be on your show right now. I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now. I wouldn't have created Women's Entrepreneurship Day. I wouldn't be investing in all this stuff. It's literally propelled me to an even more impactful life. But I am not like one of those people who's going to just, call people, right? My relationships with people, if you need me, you call me. It's going to be like we just talked yesterday. Like I don't need, it doesn't matter, right? And when you have that relationship with someone, right? So if I'm, but I'm, of course, have a lot of like not close connections, but I feel, if I need to reach out, they will respond, as well as I would never reach out if it wasn't going to benefit both parties, right? Like I would never, ever, go to, the president of Mayo Clinic and introduce him to Vicky at Lightline Medical if I didn't have the highest regard for her and I didn't think 100% in my head, we are going to save millions of lives. This is going to stop and prevent the third largest death rate in the world, infections. So I think it's about that kind of relationship. I'm not calling, the head of Mayo Clinic every day to say, hey, what are you doing tonight? You know what I mean? And it's just like having that, I think that people know, when you're real and by the way, I don't want to work with anyone who doesn't want to work with me. I don't care who says no. I don't even, your loss, because I am like one of these people who just always thinks of really cool things and has opportunities for everyone and wants to help everyone. So you're never going to please everyone. We see it today, in the
Yeah.
media.
100%, 100%, and it's cool that I appreciate your honesty in that regard. So it's not like you're actively, got a CRM. It's like, hey, reminding you, hey, reach out to 15 people a day or something like that, and saying, hey, how are you doing, whatever. It's you're going out there and saying, hey, when. Well,
I don't
I've
know.
seen some people's systems like that where
Cool.
there's
I
very
mean,
systematically in building relationships.
well, that's like what people say about my foundation, Women's Entrepreneurship Day organization. We're in 100 countries. We have the most incredible ambassadors that are just genuine about supporting and helping women entrepreneurs and impoverished women to become entrepreneurs and to support women entrepreneurs in their communities, right? And it just, I'm so bad, and I'm so like, I'm not, I'm always like, hey, you ready? And I'll do it like I'll force myself to get in contact once a week to everyone, right? Because we give them a toolkit and then they go, right? That's the whole point of it. But we have our big foundations event at the United Nations everywhere, and I laugh like I don't want to be corporate. I've never had a job. I don't even know what it's like to like have health insurance easily or have a paycheck or I don't that's not my life, right? I've never had that. I've always had to be an entrepreneur and figure out my way. And there's nothing better to me than just having being genuine about everything and not, just making a difference on a grassroots way versus this whole structural way. I just feel it's just more me being scrappy. I love startups. I love the whole space.
And yeah, and like you mentioned as well, is when you do reach out to someone, they know this is going to be a high value connection because you've had experience before and they've had experience before. And so it may not, like you mentioned, where you have to reach out to them every month, but it may be a year and like, hey, you know what? I got a really valuable connection. You guys should connect and have that synergistic relationship. I want to loop back around on something you mentioned and it reminded me of a story of a friend of mine, and he had a horrible experience on a plane, and he never, is still has never taken airplane since that experience. And so he drives everywhere, and it just becomes so rambunctious. My point is that really taught me a lesson where, you could have an experience, a negative experience in your life, dictate the future of it, or you can obviously learn from it and say, well, that was only one experience and that may happen again, but at least I can mitigate that a little bit. I can learn from that, what happened, and overcome it. My point is you had a stalker, but you allowed it to, kind of mitigate that a little bit, but then you learn from, you grew from it. And I want to dive into that a little bit further, mainly on the personal stuff, because I think we've all had where we've deployed, $1 million in a bad investment, and you go, man, I just blew that money, or whatever it was. Like you just, it's just part of life. And so instead of sitting there going, oh, I'm never going to deploy money ever again into that sector, blockchain or whatever, it's more of, okay, what can I learn from this, right? And
Yeah.
my point is what did you learn? How did you grow from that? Who was beside you to help you have the right perspective in that personal situation? If you don't mind unpacking that a little bit.
Okay. I'll, the truth, I'll tell you the truth. All right. The truth is, when I was really young, like back when I started Animal Fair, um, first of all, I've been a health nut my whole life. I've been a vegetarian, blah, blah, blah. But I was with somebody at the time that was a smoker that got me smoking. And I started when I was so stressed, starting Animal Fair and all this kind of stuff. This is going to go somewhere that you're going to crack up. All right. So, anyways, and so I was working 24 hours a day to seriously create Animal Fair and make this happen and help the world and help animals. And I was smoking like literally a pack of reds a day. Me, like who's a yogi, blah, 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 blah. And I'll never forget a friend of mine who is a producer at 2020 called me for lunch. And she says, hey, I haven't seen you for so long. Let's have lunch. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so busy. I can't. She's like, everyone needs to eat. Let's just go meet for lunch. And I'm like, okay. And I get there and I had like the Nicorette gum. I was like, or Nicorette gum. I had the patch on. I was like smoking. I said, take me to St. Vincent's Hospital if I have a heart attack. And she says, really interesting. We just had a segment on 2020 on a guy called the Mad Russian. And she said, Harvard did a study on him, spent $30 million. They couldn't figure out what it was, but they said it worked. And literally at 1 hour, $65 cash, he would get you to quit smoking. And so I literally the next week went to Boston and I went to go see him. And he's this cute little chubby, bald headed, like Russian guy, and 20 people in the room. 20 people were in the room. Like one was a heroin addict, one was like a cocaine dealer. It was like this crazy group of people, right? Who were going there for addictions. And in 1 hour and $65 cash, 20 some years ago, literally that person did more for me in my life. Like when I'm on my deathbed, I will like say thank you to him. He literally in 1 hour and $65 cash got me to stop smoking, stop biting my nails. I now work out 3 times a week. I take vitamins every day. But the most important thing I learned, by the way, and when I say I've done this now because of him every day for 20, my whole life, right? One thing I learned from him that most people don't, if you Google him, you'll see a lot of people like are like me. But I feel like I got more from him because I was just like, oh my God, I want to be better. I'm going to listen to everything. I don't want to smoke. I want to just, oh my gosh, I want to be better. So one thing I learned from him is everything's in our mind, the way we see, think, and feel. So the minute your mind goes, oh, the dark, oh, my life sucks, blah, 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 blah. Well, I seriously, because of him, I know how to quickly get out of that and be like, who are you kidding? I've got the greatest life. What's the worst that could happen? It's the key word. What's the worst that could happen? I could eat pizza and live in my home, right? Like, you have to always remember, as long as you did not do anything wrong or you didn't do anything right, you just have to remember that that it's that this is a problem and we're going to get over it, because what is an issue? Something you have not gotten over. But once you deal with it, you no longer have an issue. And so, literally, with this stalker, I just knew, like, every day, I was just like, there's a positive from this. I don't know whether I'm going to know in a day, a year, or 10 years. There's some positive to this, right? And I've always been like an optimist, and I've always been happy, and I've always been, because I've always, when I was a kid, I had to go through some crazy stuff. And, but I've always just been one of these people that have always just thought, everything's a positive. Like, there's a reason why I'm going through this. And look at, if I didn't go through the stalker, at the time, when I was like on the Today Show every month, I had a primetime show on CBS, all this stuff, right? But if I didn't go through the stalker, I would have never created Women's Entrepreneurship Day organization. There would never have been a program to help disabled women become entrepreneurs funded by Google for startups around the world. There would never have been, XYZ. There wouldn't have been base pods that are going to help pets live longer and healthier lives. Maybe they could have done it another way, but I was very interested in that company. But you know what I'm saying? There's like so much. And I feel like, wow, like everything, if I die tomorrow, it's been a great ride. Do you know what I mean? Because it's like going through all this craziness, and you're just like, wow, this has been like a crazy ride. If somebody would have told me, like, when I was drinking a 6-pack of beer in the Dairy Queen parking lot in Cleveland, Ohio, when I was growing up, that I'd live the life I'm living now, I'd be like, when can I begin?
That's so awesome. That is so awesome. And I was curious. I mean, if you think about your younger, naive Wendy, if you will, right? Young,
I'm
kind of coming
still
out, just
naive.
figured.
I'm still naive. I still I'm like, oh gosh, but I'm still naive.
But you're less naive, I guess, huh?
I am a little less naive. Look, I'm from Ohio, a 2,500 person town.
Well, obviously, I love that. I love that analogy. I love that story as well. And it's just so cool, like you mentioned, where you're reframing every example and you said, hey, somehow, I don't know how, but you're going to learn from this and it's going to be positive and it's going to, build fruition somehow and it's going to evolve into it. And you gave some really beautiful examples in that. And when you look back, I mean, you've done incredible things. You know a lot of people, and even just this snippet of our podcast, you've done 10 times more of what we talked about. If you look back on that young Wendy, like I was talking about, what insecurities did you have to overcome to become the Wendy you are currently?
What insecurities? Okay. Um, I did have to deal with, when I was younger, two mentally unstable parents, which, made me have to grow up very quickly and have two jobs and go to high school and all that kind of stuff. And I think that, just having that resilience and that understanding perseverity and under having a great work ethic, just knowing that I just really know how to get things done. And I'm creative enough to be able to figure things out. And if I didn't, and then, you'd watch, I was hit by a car when I was 15 in traction for a half a year. And I used to watch all these, I used to watch like TV, like the traction, and I'll never forget like watching all these shows and being like, oh, I wish I had that life. And then now I'm like, oh my God, I kind of have that life. And I'm like, whoa, be careful what you wish for, number one. And number two, it's just so important to be humble. And it's so important to realize, like, that we are so blessed in life to be living, right? To not forget to live and not to forget to enjoy the journey, right? How many, I think I've read so many studies about how these super rich billionaires, whatever, are, very few are happy, right? Because think about it, it's like they probably either they got lucky, right? And then what happens is they put themselves in a box because they're so scared of people because everyone probably wants something from them, right? The greatest gift is to not just to be, be hardworking, afford your life, If you want a few extra things, make sure you afford your life a little more, and just appreciate everything and be grateful.
Very well said. Very well said. It's such massive wisdom, and it's so sad because it is very unorthodox thinking. It's always bigger, better, more followers, more likes, more money, more whatever. And, we get caught into that very quickly. What do you, on a personal note, because it is so easy, we see so many people, and even still, obviously we could say that, social media has amplified that even more so. But my question is, what do you do to align yourself consistently so that you stay humble, that you align yourself and saying, hey, I don't need all this other stuff. And this is fine with me, and not keeping up with the Joneses and not comparing yourself to all this. I think this is interesting because just a few statistics that I was talking with my nephew actually. That generation right there, a lot of them are facing a lot of suicide, and the suicide rate in that is, and there's a lot of excuse, a lot of stuff, a lot of things going on. We could talk about that another day, but that was a big concern of mine because I was like, wow, because there's such massive pressure on the looks, on the image, and obviously I know men are getting into pornography and just all this just garbage and stuff like that. My point is with everything that looks kind of negative, you've been able to keep aligned with your North Star, right? Your thesis on who you are and how you are, and you show up. Like you mentioned, it's not about the money and whatever. My point is Wendy, what do you do maybe on a daily basis, maybe on a weekly basis that helps you stay integrous with who you are?
I spend a lot of time with some of the projects that we fund. So I take a trip. I this year I was in Colombia, and we funded a project for in Colombia. They accept all Venezuelans, right? And as we know, they have a very corrupt dictator. It's a horrible situation, and we funded a program with in partnership with Opportunity International to fund this program with these women with microloans. And I went there and I spent like days with these women, and I saw what they were doing with the recycling, company, and engaging all the children. And I'm going to mentor next month. I'm going to the York prison in Connecticut, and I'm going to mentor the incarcerated women are going through this entrepreneurship program. I do that. I take my time to do that. And it kind of goes back to when I was helping homeless people at the beginning of my career. I would go and feed like 1,000 homeless people a week on the Coalition for the Homeless van. I just saw the van like yesterday in New York, giving a lot of these, migrants, food. And it hit me, and I was like, wow, if going on that van and seeing and being able to hand a milk and a ham sandwich and an apple to a person with a huge smile on their face. And I'll never forget this guy with like 2 teeth back then. And then going home and then being like at the hottest restaurant with your friends, like eating dinner. And you just realize like, wow, what life is really about. Right. And I think more people, if they found what they really care about, whether it's, if they care about, curing cancer, or they care about animal rescue, of just really going and volunteering and supporting these organizations that are working on it, but really volunteering and seeing the impact that they're having. Because that really then humbles you, and you realize like, wow, I will never complain again in my life. I will never, right? And do that kind of thing. And I think that's important. And then I do yoga. I go to bed and wake up at the same time. I never get stressed. The minute my mind goes dark, what do? I think about the Mad Russian. We control our mind the way we see, think, and feel, right? A minute I can, they say you could change your mind in a second. It's true. You really can. It's the key for everyone, if you could just control your minds and the way you think and see and feel.
So powerful. Oh my gosh. Wendy, this has been such a great conversation. We should have you on again because there's so many other subjects and verticals that I want to talk about. But I appreciate you unpacking your incredible amount of experience and expertise and wisdom on this podcast. And for those that want to reach out to you and connect, I know you're very active on LinkedIn and other social media platforms. How else do they reach out to you and maybe just keep track of what you're doing, Wendy?
I'm very bad about putting it out there, but I'm on you can go to wendydiamond.com and you can see all, the stuff that I'm involved with. And then there's links to, LinkedIn and Instagram and all that.
Awesome. And make it very simple for those that are listening and watching. I'll put those links in the description so you guys can take a look at her portfolio company. You can take a, reach out to her, connect with her as well. She's very active on a lot of different platforms and very active in the community, as she has mentioned. Wendy, I appreciate you being on here big time. Thank you so much, guys. That is Wendy Diamond, the managing partner of LDP Ventures, the one and only. Guys, that is Journey with Christian podcast. Until next time, be uncommon if you can.